Hi everyone, today I'm going to be teaching you how to watercolor paint a coral reef, and these are my clownfish that I chose. You can choose other fish, but I chose clownfish for their popularity because everybody likes Finding Nemo. And I thought that they were fairly simple to do. You can choose something more complex, but we're just going to be talking about these clownfish. And fun fact about watercolor painting is it's also known as aquarelle. And it came to the western part of the globe in the 1400s. And I myself have been painting since I was about 9 years old. And I typically don't do watercolor, but the past couple of years I've been really getting into it. I had a teacher my senior year give me a lot of these watercolor books to help me with my AP portfolio, and I've just tried to use them ever since, and they're pretty awesome. So I try and use them as much as I can. I really enjoy watercolor painting, even though it's something that I don't typically do. It's something that I'm still kind of learning. So, and I decided to do a demonstration speech on it because I think that everybody can easily learn how to do watercolor painting and have a lot of fun with it because it's not something that's super hard. So yeah. Once I started getting into watercolors, I typically started painting just fish and birds, just because that's all I'd really ever seen painted in watercolor, and they're both really easy because they're not super complex figures or any kind of complex details. The feathers, they're really easy to just do because they're long and just kind of feathery, if that's a word. Just kind of fun to do with a paintbrush, just very swift and flowy. And fish don't have a lot of detail either, and so that's just kind of something that's fun to fill in. They're both really colorful too, so that's why I like doing those in watercolor. The first thing that I do typically when I'm thinking of starting a piece, or I'm preparing to start a piece, is I usually find a picture for reference. You can use Google or whatever you like to typically use for your picture or image finding, but I actually like to use Tumblr because there's a lot of really cool wildlife photographers that most people haven't really heard of, so you can actually it's kind of bad as an artist, but I use them for reference, so I'm not technically not copying, but I like to just paint their image, and most people think that it's either just from your own head. I actually can't do that, so I like to use references. That's why I'm bringing it up now. So after I find my picture for my painting, I have to decide my medium, and in this case I kind of had already decided before. I wanted to do a set of ocean scenes and animals. I've always loved painting and drawing animals. That's one of my favorite things to do. So I knew in this case what I wanted to do, but that might not always be the case if you're a really well experienced artist and you like oil paints or acrylics, or you want to draw something. It all just kind of depends. So this one we did in watercolor, and something that I came across in my research that I thought was really cool is that some of the world's oldest watercolor is from Egypt. And that's ancient. I just think that's super cool that it was just that well preserved and even made out of watercolor, because typically when you think of watercolor, you just think of paper or just really thin kind of fabric, and so you wouldn't think that that lasts very long, but it does, and I thought that was really cool. Out with a watercolor pad. You're gonna need either a watercolor pad or some strong construction paper. I would recommend these, though. They're kind of thick, but they're really good. You probably can't really see, but they're really sturdy, but also flexible, so they're really nice to use. And they don't have that, because they're made for watercolor, they're not going to have that bendy effect if you ever actually accidentally dropped water on a paper. It typically wrinkles up and kind of ruins the paper. This doesn't do that at all, so that's really cool. And I got, like I said, I got this from a gift from one of my teachers last year, and I had seen this exact watercolor paper at Walmart and also at Michael's. So you can get those at a couple places like Michael's. It's a pretty commonly found thing. The Strathmore brand is really popular. And I have other things from this particular brand, but they're really popular and you can find them pretty much anywhere. And then next you're gonna have to gather your paints. And again, I got mine, sorry for the mess because I use them a lot. I got mine from Michael's, but again, I have gotten this brand of paints at Walmart too, so you can typically find them anywhere. And I actually really prefer watercolor out of a tube. Simply because when I was younger, I think everyone's had this experience of those dinky little paint kits that they gave you with like the little flimsy black little brush. Who knows what it was made out of, but you had to put water on top of it and then somehow use it, and it just never worked very well, and if you tried to like mix the colors, it would ruin the entire thing. And so I just really like these because I typically use acrylics, and so it gives you more of that feeling of actually painting, because you take something out of a tube and you can mix them, and you have a lot of different options instead of just like the typical, I think they only had like the Roy G. Biv or rainbow colors, but in this one there's even white and black and gray and I think there's some browns in here too. And so you don't really have to mix them, but you can to get a ton of variety, and I actually really love these. So I would recommend these. They're pretty good. And for brushes, for watercolor, I like finer tipped. I don't know if you can see that, it's kind of purple. But it has a sharp top for like definition, so you can create like thinner lines, and in this case you're probably going to want to do that, and the same goes for this one. It's sharper and it's flexible, and it's not like those little cheap plastic paintbrushes that I was talking about before. They just didn't work, and they're not actual paintbrushes. And so these are really good, and I think I got these at Walmart too. They're really cheap. They're not super expensive. I think I only paid a couple dollars for these, so I would recommend these. And I use them a lot. As you can see, there's like paint and different stuff all over them, and they're kind of dyed. But you're going to need that kind of brush. 2 or 3 should be just enough. We're not going to be using a ton, but you won't just want one, because then you're going to have to constantly clean it and dip it in a bunch of different stuff, so we're not going to want to do that. You're going to want at least 2 or 3. We don't want them to be too wide or too square, and like I said, with these, they're longer and thinner and flexible. A little weird going in paintbrushes, but I like them. And the obvious, you're going to need a cup of water, and you'll also need a plate or some kind of like piece of cardboard. Paper plates use work just fine, except I kind of feel like I'm wasting it. So you can choose however you want to do that. And some paper towels. Paper towels are going to save you in this project. And then finally we get to paint. So first we're going to have to select what we paint first. And I chose the clownfish because that's going to be our main focus. So you can do the background and everything around it and work on that later, but because it's our main thing, we're going to start with it. And in this kit, you'll actually get orange. You're going to get all the colors that you need in this kit, but if you don't have that, mixing red and yellow will get you orange. So you're going to need orange. And after we're done blending, the fish can come to life. We're going to start on the clownfish by filling in the orange parts of the body and just forget about the other details like the black and the white stripes. We're going to fill that in later. But we're just going to fill in the orange details on the body. So we're going to do, you're going to start with the face. Oops. Start with the face and just kind of make like a round shape and even like a little, like an M shape for the mouth. We'll put more details in later with the black, but we'll worry about it later. And then just kind of, as you can see, you skip over, make the top fin and the middle part, and then skip over that, and then do the second fin. Clownfish actually have 2 top fins. So you're going to do a little second top fin, and then his back kind of, and then his tail. So you just, all you have to do is skip over that space and just kind of create like a little triangle. And then most fish have a longer back fin and a small front fin. So just think of like in Finding Nemo, he has very square or triangular fins in the front. So you just make like a little triangle or square in the front. And then after we are done filling in all of the orange spaces, whatever you do during this process, just remember to leave the gaps. So I know that it's finished right now, but you are going to have to pretend to leave in the gaps. So you're just going to skip over into little sections, and then we'll bring in like the black and the white stripes later. If you do it correctly, I did half of it correctly and half of it incorrectly. Probably can't tell though. These I actually left the gaps and the correct amount of space in it, so I didn't have to bring in the white paint. But if you don't have white paint, do not forget to leave in the space. That is going to be detrimental if you don't leave in the space, because then you're gonna have to find whiteout or some other thing to come back in and fill those stripes in. So yeah, don't forget about that. And then we're just gonna go into the black stripes. So get a different brush, preferably a thinner brush. And we're going to fill in a bit of the detail. So you're going to start with just the stripes for now. And in between every single orange and white area, there's going to be a black stripe. So at the end of this orange, you're going to make a black stripe. The end of this orange, and then the other side of that orange, black stripes. Black stripe on the top, black stripe on the second top, and as you can see, you can go on and on and on. And for the tail, when we get to the tail, you're not going to fill in the stripe over here. We're just going to leave it. I actually did that on this one, but I prefer the way that this one looks. So you're just going to do the outline and not the inside. So just leave that blank. We'll just do the outside and then, the little mouth. And So now that we have gotten to our white stripes, it should actually be done, but if you didn't leave in the gaps, you're gonna need to get your white paint. Hopefully you have the same kit I do. You can get your white paint and fix all of the mistakes that you made. You can sort of see a little bit of the orange, but it covers it up pretty well. And make sure that between the first and second steps, you wait for it to dry. Okay, so after we have our clownfish all painted, the next thing we're going to focus on is our background. And what I started with in this background were the corners. And I just thought of seaweed because that's such a typical thing that you would see in an ocean scene or something like that. Just little green seaweed, and all you have to do is find a green color. You can mix it with a darker green or even like a bluish kind of color, and that's sort of what I did. And I really like the way that they came out. So just kind of do the squiggles, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a really natural flowing shape, so just kind of feel it out and just work with your paintbrush. And after that's done and dry, I actually did the coral in the middle next. And this is my favorite part of it. To get the coral, I actually mixed 2 colors in this painting kit. And it was this peach. It's called Flesh Tint, but it's kind of a peachy color. And a red, and I think it was the crimson. So I blended those 2 together, and I ended up, the way that you mix it, you should end up with more of a pinkish color. And I really like the way that it came out. But I started with a line down the center and kind of like a U shape, and continued with the U shapes all the way through. And after I had done that and that was dry, I added a lot more details. So you just add more branches and more branches and more branches. And from there, you're going to add little tiny off branches from that, just to give it more detail and kind of widen it up, if that makes sense. So just kind of do little details off of that. And however you do it, it should come out just fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nature is very imperfect. So yeah, just kind of follow that and you should be good. And the next thing that I did was this little purple urchin thing. I'm not really sure why I made that, but I like it nonetheless. For this, I actually used purple and black. The black I came in later and kind of topped it, and then kind of mixed the water on top of it later. But I started with just a thicker brush and the purple, and let me see if I can demonstrate. Just kind of pushed the brush into the paper and the paint, and just pushed it on and made like these kind of like swirly shapes, and just kind of pushed the brush so it spread out and gave it that textured look. And then I kept adding more and more and more. You can just keep adding however you feel it looks best. And then after that is dry, I felt like there was something kind of missing down here, so I just kind of did some like little shapes in a lime green and a sea anemone. That's right. And just a little yellow. And I actually got some paint on top of that, but we're gonna ignore that. But I did a little yellow sea anemone in the background. And when I was done with that, I felt like it was really naked. And so as you can see, one of my signature things that I like to do in my artwork is splatter. So a lot of the stuff that I do has splatters in it, and I thought, why not bring it into this, because it was just so plain back there, and it just didn't seem natural, especially for an oceanscape, because you expect to see something back there, like a blue, an ocean blue, or something in the background. And so I just decided to throw some splatter in there. So a lot of the colors in the splatter actually came from the colors I used in the coral reef background in the plants. And for splattering, you're going to need more water than paint. So just kind of thin it out, but don't use too much. Just really lightly spread it, and just like a flick of the wrist, just a flick. Not too heavy, nothing too excessive, or it'll get all over everything. But once I was done with that, I really liked the way that it came out. And you don't have to do that, you can do something else. I would not recommend making the background blue, however, just because it would mix, doing a different color background in watercolor kind of mixes with all the other paints and that you have already laid down and dry, and it kind of makes a mess. So I wouldn't recommend that, but you can go ahead and do it if you would like. But I really like this, and because I've been an artist for a really long time, I actually have my signature up here in the corner, and yeah, and I actually really liked the way that this came out, but to some other people it probably wouldn't be that great, but I'm a little proud of it just because I'm not too well fluenced in watercolor, and I think that's the really great thing about watercolor is you don't have to know much about it to have fun and kind of make something that you like with it, and I ended up really liking it. While not everyone can be a Picasso, everyone can enjoy painting. From 1 to 100, anyone can pick up this craft. Practice and use of good art tools can really go far, as well as a good painting lesson from good old Bob Ross, who I grew up watching and I love, and I hope I make him proud with this video. And you too can experience the joy of painting. I hope this was fun for you. I hope this will inspire you to be your own artist and maybe make your own seascape or clownfish or whatever you want to do. I know art has enriched my life, and I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you.